At exactly 3:07 a.m., I woke up to the sound of heavy chains clinking and something scraping across my driveway. And when I looked out my window, I saw Karen from the HOA trying to hook my boat to a tow truck. I rubbed my eyes and squinted through the blinds, thinking I was dreaming, but no. There she was, Karen Delaney, the infamous HOA president who turned Oak Ridge Estates into her personal kingdom, complete with unsolicited property inspections and neighborhood gossip surveillance. And now she was in my driveway, clipboard in hand, her bleached hair glowing under the streetlight like a halo of control-freak insanity. She was shouting something to the tow truck driver, pointing at my boat, my pride and joy, like it was an abandoned fridge in an alley. I tore out the front door in nothing but my pajama pants and a faded Bass Pro t-shirt, barefoot, heart pounding. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She didn't flinch. The tow truck driver paused, holding the winch cable like he was waiting for confirmation. Karen turned to me with a smug, bureaucratic smile. "You were warned, Mr. Lawson," she said in that nasal tone that grated like sandpaper on metal. "Your boat violates the Oak Ridge HOA community standards. Section 7B, prohibited large recreational vehicles parked in front of homes for more than 48 hours. I stared at her. "Karen, I've told you 3 times. My house isn't under HOA jurisdiction. I opted out. I bought before your rules applied to this part of the block." She shrugged. "Technically, it's in view of the street, which affects neighborhood aesthetics." "Are you serious?" I said, pointing at the tow truck. "You're towing private property? This is theft." "I'm enforcing order," she said, lifting her clipboard. "You had your warning." The tow truck driver looked uneasy. "Ma'am, maybe we should wait for—" "No," Karen snapped. "It's already been reported." I pulled out my phone, recording everything. "You're touching my property without consent. This is illegal, Karen." And then, like a script she had memorized, she screamed, "He's threatening me. He's attacking me." The tow truck driver looked panicked. I backed away, still recording. Minutes later, red and blue lights flashed down the street. 2 patrol cars. I explained everything, showed the video. Karen went into full victim mode, sobbing about how unsafe she felt and how I had lunged at her. But the officers weren't buying it. The body cam footage proved I hadn't touched her. My security camera confirmed she had entered my property without permission. The cops asked the tow truck driver a few questions, gave Karen a warning, and told everyone to go home. I sighed and peeled it off, noticing something else. My trailer tire had been slashed, clean cut. This wasn't about regulations. This was personal. I spent that Saturday trying to repair the damage. I called a friend with a mobile mechanic service to replace the tire and checked the wheel bearings. We also noticed the tongue lock had been tampered with. Someone had tried to pick it. Then came the online slander. Karen posted in the Oak Ridge Community Facebook group, warning residents about a dangerous neighbor with unstable tendencies who was harboring a hazardous boat illegally. She posted a blurred photo of my boat, conveniently forgetting to mention that I legally owned it and had cleared it with the city council months before. People started staring. A few neighbors even crossed the street to avoid walking past my driveway. I filed a harassment complaint. The police couldn't do much unless Karen physically trespassed again or caused more damage. So I decided to beat her at her own game through documentation. I installed new security cameras, high def, motion activated, and I began building a folder. Every interaction, every note, every time she passed by and took photos. I even caught her one afternoon standing behind my recycling bin with binoculars. The next HOA meeting, she publicly announced plans to push for emergency amendments to expand HOA visual jurisdiction to the entire block. Her speech sounded like it came straight from a dictator's handbook. "If we let one person defy order, we set a precedent for chaos." A few neighbors clapped. Others looked uncomfortable. One man raised his hand and said, "I don't think we should punish people for having hobbies." Karen shut him down. "We're not punishing anyone, we're preserving property value." When I stood up and tried to counter, she cut my mic. "Your time is up, Mr. Lawson." After that, things got worse. My garbage bins were flipped every Monday morning. My mail started arriving late or not at all. Someone glued a for sale sign to the side of my boat cover with epoxy. I tried to keep my cool, but it was clear. This wasn't just a feud anymore. Karen wanted to break me, publicly, completely. But she underestimated one thing. I was already digging, and I was about to uncover something she didn't want anyone to know. I found the hidden camera, duct taped under my mailbox, 3 days after the police were called. But the footage it recorded before I yanked it off revealed something even worse. Karen had been inside my backyard gate. 3 days had passed since the infamous 3 a.m. boat towing incident, and my nerves still hadn't settled. I checked my cameras every night. I didn't sleep more than a couple hours at a time. I'd started double locking my backyard fence and putting motion sensors on the side gate. But I wasn't prepared for what I found that morning. I was doing a sweep of my front yard, checking for more slash marks or anonymous warning letters, when I noticed something strange beneath the mailbox. A tiny piece of gray duct tape, curling at the edges. I bent down and saw a small blinking light. A mini camera. One of those cheap Wi-Fi ones you can find online. Mounted beneath my mailbox, angled right at my driveway, and my boat. I unscrewed it and took it inside, hooking it up to my laptop with a USB adapter. No password. It had been recording onto a micro SD card. I copied the files and opened the most recent clips. There she was, Karen Delaney, standing in my driveway in the middle of the afternoon, looking both ways like a cartoon thief before tiptoeing up to my backyard gate. She fumbled in her pocket, pulled out a key, and slipped inside like she owned the place. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Karen had been inside my backyard. The timestamp was just 2 days ago. I clicked through the next few files. Nothing but footage of my boat, cars pulling up, kids playing across the street. But that clip, Karen entering my yard, was all the confirmation I needed. I sent the footage to my friend Jax, who works part-time for a private security company. He confirmed the camera was a basic surveillance model and likely linked to someone's phone. She probably parked somewhere nearby to pick up the footage wirelessly, he said. It made sense. I'd seen Karen's black SUV lingering on the corner some evenings, lights off. I reported the camera and trespassing footage to the police. The officer said, "It's deeply concerning, but unless you can prove intent to damage or steal, it's a misdemeanor." Great. So basically she could break into my backyard and spy on me, and the law would wag its finger and move on. That night, I installed another layer of protection, a hidden trail cam in the bushes behind my garage set to record 24/7. And that's when I caught her again. 3 nights later, around 2:30 a.m., Karen crept around my side gate, this time with gloves on. She didn't have a flashlight, just the glow of her phone as she scanned the side of my boat. She crouched near the engine, did something, then left. The next morning, I went to check. My outboard engine hatch had been tampered with. Not just opened, someone had poured something into it. I opened the bilge pump and stared in horror. Fine, gray, fresh concrete powder had been dumped into the drain channel. That wasn't just trespassing. That was sabotage. I documented everything with photos and video, then filed another police report. They said it might be vandalism, but they'd need clear footage of her committing the act. I wanted to scream. She was always one step ahead, always skating just under the law's radar. That's when I realized this wasn't about my boat. It never had been. This was about control. Karen didn't like people who didn't follow her rules. And my boat, a legal, perfectly stored beautiful watercraft, was a visible symbol of her failure to dominate every square inch of Oak Ridge Estates. I needed backup. Later that week, I was walking my dog when I bumped into Carl, an older gentleman who lived 3 houses down. He was quiet, well-kept, and always seemed to avoid HOA meetings like the plague. He looked at me with knowing eyes. "She's after you now, huh?" I paused. "You know about her?" He glanced around, then leaned in. "I was on the HOA board 5 years ago, before she pushed everyone out." I stared at him. "You mean she kicked you off?" "Not directly," he said. "She created a bunch of new compliance amendments, used them to accuse board members of bias and procedural violations. Within a year, we were all gone. She runs the board now like a dictatorship. No votes, no transparency." He hesitated, then motioned for me to follow him home. Inside, Carl pulled out an old leather file folder and opened it on his kitchen table. Inside were emails, printed agendas, vote logs, and a list of complaints, all highlighting how Karen had bullied, coerced, and lied her way into full HOA control. "She's obsessed with appearance," he said, "and money." He flipped to a page labeled Lake Dock Revenue. "She's been renting out dock access to non-residents," he whispered. "Cash only, no board approval. Probably pocketed tens of thousands." I sat back. "And no one stopped her?" "No one has proof," Carl said. "Until now." He handed me a USB drive. "Everything I've gathered. I haven't had the guts to go public, but you've got her attention. If you're willing to fight her, this might help." I took it. That night, I opened the drive on my laptop. Inside were because if a resident used the dock, it would draw attention, it would raise questions. It would ruin the illusion that the dock was off limits, the illusion she used to rent it out under the table. I stared at the spreadsheet, feeling a strange mix of rage and vindication. This wasn't a petty HOA fight anymore. It was fraud. And it was time to bring Karen Delaney down. The moment I emailed Karen's dock rental spreadsheet to the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Fraud Division, I got a call back within 3 hours. And the voice on the other end wasn't just interested. He was already investigating her. I didn't expect a response so quickly. I'd submitted a short, formal message along with the Excel file I got from Carl, titled Possible HOA Financial Misconduct, Anonymous Tip. I didn't mention my name, didn't give specifics beyond the fact that an HOA president was renting public community dock slips for personal gain without approval. But 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. "This is Special Agent Raymond Clark with the HUD Office of Inspector General. You submitted a tip this morning?" My pulse shot up. "Yes, I did. I need to ask you a few questions, off the record for now. Are you able to talk?" "Absolutely." We spent the next 40 minutes discussing everything. Karen's harassment, the forged notices, the security footage, the secret dock rentals. Agent Clark was calm, precise, and alarmingly well-informed. By the time we hung up, he told me something that made my blood run cold. "Mr. Lawson, this isn't the first complaint we've had about Karen Delaney." He didn't elaborate, but that was enough. Karen wasn't just a control-obsessed HOA president. She was a repeat offender. And now, I was smack in the middle of a federal investigation. Over the next few days, I stayed quiet. No confrontations, no Facebook responses, nothing. I let Karen believe I was finally beaten, that her intimidation had worked. But behind the scenes, I was working with Agent Clark. I gave him every file Carl had collected, I sent my security footage, the mailbox camera video, the concrete in my engine, and screenshots of Karen's messages. Clark told me to stay patient and warned that these investigations could take weeks, even months. Then, on a breezy Friday morning, I got a surprise. A new neighbor, a quiet woman named Rachel, who had just moved in across the street, knocked on my door. "Hey, weird question," she said, shifting nervously. "Did the HOA give you a hard time when you moved in?" I almost laughed. "Oh, you have no idea." She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Karen told me I wasn't allowed to park in my own driveway for more than 2 hours at a time. Then she tried to fine me for having a kayak on my roof rack." I raised an eyebrow. "Your own driveway?" Rachel nodded. "I called the city planning office. Turns out there's no such regulation. She made it up." I told her everything, from the boat towing incident to the surveillance camera. She was stunned. But then she said something that nearly knocked me off my feet. She offered to rent me dock access, cash only. Said it was a special favor for new neighbors. She even had a printed list of prices. My jaw clenched. "Do you still have that list?" Rachel pulled out her phone. Scanned it. It was even worse than the spreadsheet. Printed in HOA letterhead font, but clearly not official. It listed dock rental rates, cash deposit policies, and a non-existent security fund fee. I forwarded the file to Agent Clark immediately. The next day, he called me again. "Mr. Lawson, thank you for this. This document gives us physical proof of intent to profit from public community resources under false pretenses. That crosses into fraud territory." Then he paused. "We're moving forward with on-site interviews next week. I'd like you to stay alert. If she escalates, call local law enforcement immediately and record everything." That night, I checked my backyard camera again. And sure enough, Karen had come snooping again. This time, she didn't go near the boat. She just walked along the back fence, phone in hand, recording my property. She looked nervous. She knew something was coming. 2 days later, it came. 3 unmarked black SUVs pulled into Oak Ridge Estates just after 10 a.m. 2 men in business suits and a woman in a dark blazer stepped out and walked directly to Karen's house. It wasn't loud. No sirens. No handcuffs in the street. But Karen's face, when she opened the door, was pure theater. Neighbors peeked out of windows and watched as the agent stepped inside. For over 2 hours, the vehicles remained outside. I stayed indoors, pacing, phone in hand, ready for anything. Around noon, Agent Clark texted me. "Initial interview complete. Investigation is ongoing. Your cooperation has been extremely helpful." By evening, the Oak Ridge Facebook group was exploding. "Anyone know what's going on at Karen's? Saw government agents at her house? She's deleting comments. Someone screenshot this." Karen, for her part, tried to keep control. She posted a community-wide message that read, "To all Oak Ridge Estates residents, please do not listen to rumors. Certain individuals have been spreading misinformation and engaging in slanderous activity. I am cooperating fully with a routine audit and will not tolerate harassment." That message didn't age well, especially when, the next morning, a formal notice from the HOA legal committee appeared on everyone's door, not signed by Karen. It stated that an internal review had begun regarding past financial practices, and until further notice, Karen Delaney was suspended as acting HOA president. I stepped onto my porch and exhaled. But I knew this wasn't over. People like Karen don't just disappear quietly. And sure enough, 3 hours later, I caught her again, this time yelling at Carl on his lawn. "You've always been jealous!" she screamed, red-faced. "You and that little fisherman freak next door. You think you're going to ruin me?" I stepped outside with my phone recording. She saw me and froze. "You." "We've officially elevated the case," he said. "There's potential embezzlement, wire fraud, and obstruction of investigation." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means Karen Delaney is now the subject of a federal probe." He paused. "And if you're willing, We might need you to testify. I looked out the window at my boat, now safely behind a locked fence and under a tarp. I could still see Karen's house, but now the power had shifted, and I wasn't afraid anymore. I woke up to find my truck's windshield shattered, and a bright yellow envelope duct taped to the hood. Inside was a fake legal notice. Signed, the true HOA president. I thought the worst was over. Karen had been suspended from her role, the feds were involved, and neighbors were finally starting to whisper openly about her schemes. But I should have known better. People like Karen don't just retreat, they reload. It started with the truck. I walked outside one crisp morning and froze. My F-150, parked in my driveway like always, had a spider web of cracks across the entire windshield, and in the center, a bright yellow envelope, duct taped on like a trophy. I tore it off and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, bold font, legalese nonsense. Notice of intent to sue for harassment, defamation, and HOA policy violations. Signed, falsely, by the true HOA president, Karen Delaney. It wasn't from a lawyer. There was no case number, no legal letterhead, just a poorly written scare tactic designed to intimidate me into silence. I took pictures of everything, filed a police report, called my insurance, and then I called Agent Clark. He was furious. "She's now engaging in retaliation," he said. "We're expanding the scope. Don't confront her. Let us handle it." But it wasn't just me anymore. Later that afternoon, I heard a knock on my door. It was Rachel, the new neighbor from across the street, and she looked shaken. "She's been leaving notes in my mailbox," Rachel said, showing me a crumpled letter. "It says I'm violating aesthetic codes because of the color of my garage door." The door was beige, perfectly standard. "She's trying to scare anyone who talks to you," I said. "I'm not backing down," Rachel replied, her voice firm. "And you shouldn't either." 2 days later, things escalated again. This time it wasn't just passive-aggressive letters or vandalism. It was public humiliation. Karen had somehow gotten access to my old Facebook posts, ones I'd made years ago before moving to Oak Ridge. She printed out screenshots, took them out of context, and began handing them around the neighborhood. She claimed I was anti-community, hostile to women, and a threat to neighborhood values. It was laughable, until I realized she was handing these flyers to potential buyers during a nearby open house. That's when I snapped. I drove straight to Carl's house, USB in hand, and told him everything she'd done. Carl shook his head slowly. "She's scared. She knows she's cornered." "I want her stopped, Carl," I said. "For good." He nodded, said, "Then it's time to talk to the other side." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "There's another former board member you haven't met. She moved out 2 years ago, after Karen threatened to expose her in front of her church for opposing a budget change. But she saved something. Important." He gave me her number. "Tell her I sent you." Nina was hesitant at first, but once I mentioned Carl and Karen, she invited me over. Her small home was cluttered with old binders and HOA newsletters. She pulled out a manila folder marked Karen Executive Malpractice. Inside was a printout of an email chain between Karen and a man named Andrew Greer, presumably a contractor. The emails outlined creative accounting solutions for diverting maintenance funds toward beautification projects. But the invoices were doctored. The amounts paid didn't match what was recorded in the HOA meeting minutes. Karen used fake bids, Nina explained. She got 2 fake companies to lose the bids and awarded the job to a contractor she personally selected, who, we later learned, was her cousin. Then she overcharged the HOA and split the difference. How much? At least 40 grand over 2 years. My jaw tightened. This was a smoking gun. Nina smiled faintly. "I couldn't do anything back then, but now, with the feds involved, this is fuel for the fire." I sent it all to Agent Clark. He replied in less than 10 minutes. "This confirms prior suspicions. We're issuing the subpoena for HOA financials tomorrow. Tell Nina thank you." The next night, it happened. My trail cam behind the garage caught someone in a hoodie, face obscured, throwing something into my yard. a glass bottle. When I found it the next morning, I realized it wasn't just trash, it was a Molotov cocktail that had failed to ignite. There was a burnt rag sticking from the mouth of the bottle, but the fuel had leaked out before lighting. It hadn't exploded, it hadn't even caught, but the message was clear. Back off, or else. I turned over the footage to the police. This time, they took it seriously. They increased patrols in the area, put out a neighborhood alert, and Clark, he was furious. "She's crossed into criminal threat territory," he said. "This isn't HOA anymore, this is federal obstruction and intimidation." Karen had gone too far, and now it was only a matter of time before justice closed in. That weekend, Oak Ridge held an emergency community meeting, without Karen. Carl, Rachel, and I showed up early. So did Nina, back from her new neighborhood to testify. Dozens of neighbors packed into the clubhouse. Carl stood at the front holding a folder. "I served on this board when Oak Ridge was a peaceful place," he said. "But under Karen Delaney, that peace was stolen, and so was your money." He opened the folder and started reading out dollar amounts. Misused funds, overcharges, fraudulent invoices. Then I showed them the photos. The camera under my mailbox, the concrete in my boat's engine, the fake legal notices, the flyers. Rachel described the intimidation. Nina explained the false contracts. The room went silent. Then someone at the back stood up. "We want her gone." More voices joined. "Ban her from the board. File charges." That was the moment we all realized. This wasn't Karen's kingdom anymore. Oak Ridge was rising, and she was about to fall.